we declare our right on this earth to be a man, to be a human being, to be respected as a human being, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, in this day, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary. We declare our right.
There we go. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Revolutionary Fourth Sundays. I'm Brother Zaid Muhammad, your lead organizer for the Malcolm X Commemoration Cmte. And I'm really excited about this particular conversation, one I've been wanting to do for a while. Just very briefly, many of you know that Akili and I were both in the film Who Killed Malcolm X? And unfortunately, the filmmakers had no clue what to do with what we were trying to bring to that conversation. And I wish we had the resources to do 6 installments of how we view Malcolm's legacy. It would be very different. All due respect to their good intentions, and I'm sure that they had to some degree, and the impact that they had. Just by way of introduction, Akili Buchanan is a radical educator, retired now, good for him, right? A brilliant artist, and was an important force when he was quite a young man, a teenager, at what was then Southside High School in Newark, New Jersey, and led a petition campaign to have that school renamed after Malcolm X. Lawrence Hamm, also known as Adhimu Chunga, name given to him by the immortal Amiri Baraka, who is the ancestor guiding the focus of this particular conversation, was on the Board of Education after leading an epic student walkout during the time when Newark teachers were on strike, right? And became the youngest person to be appointed to a Board of Education with the authority to vote. And when Akili brought his petitions, it was Adhimu who led the charge on the board to get that approved. And that's a catalytic moment to really capture the impact of Malcolm's legacy on Newark, New Jersey, right? And Newark became a beachhead for radical organizing in the aftermath of our uprising, as epitomized by the work of the great Amiri Baraka. So we're calling this conversation Malcolm X, Newark, and the world, the Baraka Factor. And I would call these two men, when they were young men, would call them cubs of Amiri Baraka. Right? So it's a very profound conversation that we're looking forward to. And it will clear up a lot of things that were missed in that well-meaning effort that became Who Killed Malcolm X. Some background is in order for those of you joining us for the first time. Right on, straight ahead, Amiri Baraka from the Mighty December 12th movement just checked in on YouTube. One of our maximum comrades and allies. The relationship that we have with December 12th movement is incredible. Yeah, and that's a long conversation. And of course, Roger Wareham was with us with Omali Yeshitela several Revolutionary Fourth Sundays ago when we were talking about the epic question of reparations. Malcolm X Commemoration Cmte was started back in 1992 with one Herman Ferguson, who was in the OAAU with Malcolm, actually had just gotten out of prison. And some background is important for Herman because Herman, like few in the organization at that time, actually tried to do some things as an organizer in keeping with Malcolm's line. Most especially, and the one that got the most attention is when he organized the Jamaica Rifle and Pistol Club that existed in Jamaica, Queens, that trained anyone who wanted that training from our community in armed self-defense. Of course, when you do things like that, you're going to get the attention of forces like the FBI and other government security agencies, and that's certainly what happened with Baba Herman. And Herman would later be framed as a COINTELPRO target for conspiring to kill Whitney Young and Roy Wilkins, if you can imagine that. Ludicrous as that was, Herman faced a conviction, and he decided to opt for exile as opposed to be sent into prison for something as insane as that. And he spent almost 20 years I was going to say closer to 30 years in Guyana, when that new country was, developing its own footing as a new independent nation from Britain. Herman was key in the development of its military infrastructure and its educational infrastructure. Remember, he was a radical educator coming into the OAU. And in 1989, facing advanced age, he was 69 at the time, he opted to come back to the United States in an effort to clear his name. And of course, as soon as he landed, he was taken into custody before Harlem judicial legend Judge Bruce Wright. Judge Wright, true to his judicial legacy, looked at the absurdity of the case and the total lack of evidence, all of that, and did what became a part of the mantra surrounding his legacy. He cut Herman loose. As soon as Herman got loose, Herman was also concerned about the commercial attention that Malcolm was getting, and worried about what that could mean, as a lot of us were worried at the time, in terms of efforts to try and water down, commercialize, and sterilize Malcolm's revolutionary legacy. So he pulled together some of his comrades from the OAAU and others of us who were dyed-in-the-wool Malcolmites, if you will, and put together what became the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee. People like Yuri Kuchiyama, the late great champion of international human solidarity, Yuri Kuchiyama. Butch Gladstone, one of the strongest and bravest men and part of Malcolm's security detail, often when he was in the nation and when he was in the OAAU. Gene Reynolds, just a devoted member of both the nation and OAU and Muslim Mosque Incorporated. Earl Grant, brilliant, brave warrior elder who was responsible for turning the surveillance tricks of the state on the state itself. Earl, electrical engineer by training, actually created a listening device in Malcolm's home in the event that he would be greeted with some uninvited guests. And of course, the FBI tried to buy Malcolm not once, but 3 times to become an informant. They got him on tape. They got the FBI on tape doing that by virtue of the organizing and tech savviness of Earl Grant. Earl will go crazy with this tech stuff that's going on now. And may the ancestors be pleased with him. Elders like that were brought into into what became the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee. Sam Anderson, SNCC warrior, Panther warrior, best known for his Holocaust for Black beginners, was a part of our beginning. We used to have our first meetings at the Center for Constitutional Rights because we had a warrior lawyer there by the name of Joan Gibbs, who was Baba Herman's personal lawyer at the time. We got all Baba Herman's FBI files through the resilience and the brilliance of Joan Gibbs. And they pulled me into the mix because at the time I was doing something called the Malcolm X Ancestral Memory Project at the Newark Public Library and at the Harlem State Office Building, bringing elders and lifting up Malcolm's history at that time in the way that I did and the way that I do. Herman's wife, Ialua, actually recruited me to join the organization as Herman was leaving because she was really appreciated the way that we always included and lifted up our political prisoners. And Herman was still inside when we began that serious relationship. Over the years, we've done a number of things. Malcolm X in the classroom, we actually would visit students and go into the classroom and do talks on Malcolm. The essay contest that we did within the New York school system around the autobiography of Malcolm X. We're best known for our annual Freedom Fighters Dinner Tribute, an annual fundraising dinner that we did to honor our political prisoners and their families. And the proceeds from those fundraisers would go to the commissaries of the families who represented their loved ones who were in prison. We did that for 25 consecutive years until the advent of COVID. Then COVID, and I'm coming into our apologies now that we go to work. COVID interrupted us on many fronts. It took us out of public space. We also found ourselves being ejected from a bank because we did not have 501c3 status, and we're still struggling with what that means in terms of banking. And some of our members have moved on. Herman and Yalu. Herman retired years ago. Mama Yalu just passed just last year. But moving forward, in addition to these virtual conversations that we've had, and we've had some good ones, right? And please follow them on YouTube because they're there, and we have some that we're going to add, and we're going to continue this Revolutionary Fourth Sunday for at least for the duration of this centennial year. That is 2025. We're also going to try and recover some that we lost. We got the attention of the mother fathers of social media, and our very international Malcolm X Commemoration Committee Facebook page got taken down. My personal page has been taken down twice. Even one of my emails had been taken down twice, and that activity would sharpen with the emergence of the Gaza genocide, and of course our uncompromising commitment to Palestinian people in the face of this Gaza genocide. We're going to have to reclaim all of that, and it's going to require a redo of our webpage, which is outdated and inoperable right now, and that'll allow us to come back more fully present in this space. But our YouTube is good, and we bring this to you proudly today live on YouTube. Our next Revolutionary Fourth Sunday will be on the let's see where it is, whatever that fourth Sunday is in the 24th, in the middle of Black August, towards the end of Black August. That'll be our next Revolutionary Fourth Sunday. And we've got some guests in line already. They're not confirmed yet. As soon as they're confirmed, y'all will see that fly. Pay attention to my Facebook page right now, Zaid Muhammad on Facebook, and I do a post a day lifting up Malcolm's legacy and pushing the work as we see it around the international Black world as Malcolm is being celebrated this year. So that's a lot, right? And of course, I could add more to that, but in the interest of time, because we want to try and do these conversations in a tight hour, because almost everybody that we bring into these conversations are actively engaged organizers in their own right. And at a time like this, when we are, battling an ugly dance with fascism, all of us are quite busy. And if you're not, you probably ain't attuned to just really what's happening and what this particular moment requires of us. I want to thank in the background for Rafisa Shahabuddin, our teacher of the year from Shabazz High School. Her school is and its history will be very much a part of this conversation. I want to acknowledge one of our members who was supposed to be in last month's conversation, and apology number 2, we couldn't do last month because we couldn't get all of the guests lined up to bring that together. Charles Azukili Mitchell, who represented us on a delegation of folks from this country that went down to Malcolm's mother's Grenada. There is an emerging Malcolm X Memorial Foundation in Grenada dedicated to Malcolm and his mother, his brave Garveyite mother, Louise Langdon Norton Little. And Brother Charles had quite an impact on that delegation, and we want to shout out Charles with that, and also some other things that he has been doing with the Netflix boycott that we are doing in connection with a horrible reboot of Good Times as a cartoon that's taken our worst stereotypes to a whole nother place, and that's another conversation. Michael Ferguson, our treasurer, the son of Herman Ferguson, Grace Birch, right? Solid presence, and others who have been supporting us down and through the years. With that, let me do a just brief libation statement, and we will go to work. Well, the ancestors of the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee, for the 4 directions of the north, the south, the east, the west, we say, Ibaye, Ashe, I call on Herman Ferguson and his queen, Ayalua Ferguson, for what they brought us to this great work. And we say, for their names, we say, Ibaye, Ashe, Ibaye, Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. For Earl Grant, one of the brave ones. Butch Gladstone, another one of the brave ones, we say, Ibaye, Ashe, 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 oh. Jean Reynolds, devoted to the fullest, and a mother of another fierce Pan-Africanist. Her daughter was a great organizer under Kwame and the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. Her daughter, Naima, for Gene Reynolds, we say, Ibaye, Ashe, Ibaye, Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. And of course, I mentioned Yuri Kuchiyama, the legendary international champion of international solidarity, who was with Malcolm right up until that fateful day. And she was a legend in her own right before she joined Malcolm's OAU, as a champion of nuclear disarmament, being a survivor of Japanese concentration camps here in this country during World War II. Yes, the Americans put Japanese in concentration camps in this country in World War II. And of course, the survivors of the bombing, of the nuclear bombing that horribly ended World War II in a way that was totally racist, genocidal, and wrong. And then she, in that space, she was a legend even before she joined this movement. She was called to love by the name of Malcolm X. For Yui Kuchiyama, we say Ibaye, Ashe, Ashe. For Malcolm's Queen Betty Bahia Shabazz, we say Ibaye, Ashe, Ashe. For Malcolm's daughter, Malika Shabazz, we say Ibaye, Ashe, Ashe. Malcolm's grandson, Malcolm Latif Shabazz, Ibaye, Ashe, Ashe. Malcolm's courageous parents, Earl and Louise Little both, we say Ibaye, Ashe, 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 Ashe. And of course, for Black Shining Prince, father of Black Revolution, we say Ibaye, Ashe, Ashe. So we end as we begin of the north, the south, the east, west. Ibaye, Ashe, 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 Ashe. Oh, gentlemen, welcome to Revolutionary Fourth Sundays. I'm glad to have you both with us. We've known each other for years, and you know we've done a lot of things together over the years, but this is something that we haven't done in this way, and I'm just really glad and honored to have that both of you would take the time to be with us. Adhimu, we just together shared, as we have been for better than 30 years now, July 12th, the anniversary of the launch of the epic Newark Uprising. And of course, on that day itself, Amiri went to go see what was going on. And on Springfield Avenue, he had his head split open by a police officer who he happened to have been a high school classmate of in Barringer. In spite of that, several days later, July 20th, there was a National Black Power Conference right here in Newark after those tanks rolled out on July 17th. And over 1,000 people.
That was my birthday.
Huh?
July 20th
really?
is my birthday.
That's a loaded day. Loaded day. Loaded day. Also the anniversary of Garvey launching the UNIA.
Just turned 71.
We're climbing the ladder. We're climbing the ladder. And climbing it with grace too. I'm a little behind y'all, but I hope I'm doing as well as y'all do when I get into my 70s. But yeah, that's a loaded day. The anniversary of Garvey launching the UNIA, the anniversary of the National Black Power Conference, that Amiri participated with that bandage flush on his head for what they did to him, and it didn't hold him back at all. It's a very loaded day on a number of fronts in our history. It happens to be the loaded day for us here in Newark now. We have something in Newark called community-based violence intervention. It came out of the protests of the Newark Anti-Violence Coalition, 155 straight weeks to really shake things up around the violence in this town. And of course, we moved the needle quite a bit. And it's not an accident that Amiri's son, Mayor Ras Baraka, would be out in front of that, right? But on July 20th in 2009, a woman by the name of Lakeisha Allen was shot to death in the crossfire over on Elizabeth and Meeker, and that's what set off our protests. And Ras took the lead at that, and that was before he became mayor. And we would later help leverage that to make him mayor and really develop the strategy that has been responsible for bringing down violence in this town to a historic low and doing it without the police. I want y'all to get a good whiff of that. Malcolm is the father of the credible messengers that do that work. So, just by way of introduction, I want each of you to take a minute and just place yourselves in that time frame from 67 into those incredible organizing years and efforts that took place right here in Newark, that y'all witnessed and were a part of, right? And that, is the other story of Malcolm's relationship to Newark. It is not just the assassination. Assassination was real. Those hitters did come out at 25. Not only that, the ones that did not get captured came back that night to 25 and reported it in. And they could not have done that had there not been collaboration with national security forces and local security forces. It is not an accident that the police totally retreated from their area so that all of them can actually make their escape. And had it not been for one of Malcolm's soldiers, right, the late great Reuben X. Francis, who, well, I say didn't get the memo, who carried that day when everybody else didn't, Reuben popped one of the shooters, and that's how that shooter got captured. And that man's name is Talmadge Hare, and he's the only one that was actually involved at that time. That's real. That happened. Mos 25, and I am a son of Mos 25. I'm saying this with painful self-criticism. Represented both the best and the worst of the Nation of Islam in its history. I just described the worst. The best, of course, is something real too. Mos 25 had the largest influence in the area in relationship to other mosques, including the Chicago and Detroit were considered the mother mosques, if for lack of a better word for it, right? And that's something that's also unique to Mos 25's history that should be appreciated. But there was an element that did that mess on February 21st, and it represented something that nobody should want to be a part of. And there's still some healing that needs to be done and resolve that needs to be done. I may go into some things at the end that both Imam Warathdin Muhammad did and Minister Farrakhan did to try and address some of that, right? But today we want to focus on the other side of the conversation, right? Akili, why don't you start off? Just place yourself in that, and then we definitely got to get into that story around that's how Southside became Shabazz, right? Adhimu, border education, Gary, right? And both of y'all had your hands and eyes on the organization, all that stuff, right? And of course, who was the Imamu? Who was Amiri Baraka? Why are we not talking about him as an organizer? We'll talk about him as a poet and a playwright, but he was an organizer. And these two young men, and I'm calling them young because they were young men, are organizing legacy, right? Keely, let me start off with you. Place yourself back in those times. Take us back.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And Adhimu and I have gone back 50 years, and I appreciate it. Talk about our struggles together. A teenager, I think I was 13 or 14. You gotta understand context, the world context, and the context of politics going on in the United States, the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, the rising Black liberation movement, women. All of that had a major impact and influence on the zeitgeist and my thinking. I remember when Malcolm's autobiography came out, I read it from cover to cover, and in 2-3 days, and was moved by that, moved by struggles that were going on. I had the honor and the privilege of meeting Amiri Baraka during the Black and Puerto Rican political convention. I think that was 1970, where brothers and sisters here in Newark ran an entire slate of Black and Puerto Rican candidates to take municipal power from the Hugh Adnizio administration. And I was a young brother supporting Dennis Westbrook's, who ran for Central Ward Councilman. And we put on an incredible presentation as young people and Brother Westbrook's, and it moved the committee to come to us and thank us for being part of it, part of the convention. And he saw, we were teenagers, and he saw us as young brothers and sisters who were being committing themselves to struggle for the struggle of Black Power. I soon became a member of his organization as Adhimu Chunga, Young Lion. And I can't underscore the influence, the impact that Amiri Baraka had on my development, both intellectual and creative. I wouldn't be the person I am today without his indelible influence on my revolutionary thinking and my cultural development as well. And so that was the context at that time. I'll let Adhimu talk about his worldview at the time.
Well, keep going. Bring it up to Malcolm X, and then I'll come back. Malcolm X High School, and then I'll come in.
Okay. I was a member of Amiri's organization at the time, the Committee for Unified Newark, which later became the Congress of African People. But as a senior at Southside High School, the high school where my mother went, in fact, it was the high school where Ed Koch went, Sharp James went. As a Simba Wachunga, my responsibility at the time was to, after Mayor Gibson was elected and a number of brothers from the Black and Puerto Rican Convention and the slate were elected, CFUN, Committee for Unified Newark, was changing, helping communities change the name of various institutions, particularly schools, after famous and revered Black and Puerto Rican persons. I had the charge of a petition drive to change the name of Southside High School after Malcolm X Shabazz High School, and we wanted to include the word Shabazz because that was his name that he gave himself, particularly after his sojourn, his Hajj to Mecca. And at the time, Adhimu was at the Board of Education. He was the youngest member of the Board of Education ever. And number of us at Southside, put out petitions, tried to gather as many names as possible. And at some point, we went to the Board of Ed with our petitions in hand, requesting the name change to Malcolm X Shabazz High School. And it remains Malcolm X Shabazz to this day, in spite of the fact that there are many folk after the name change who were a bit displeased because Southside had a reputation as a major basketball and football high school, and they did not want that lost. But we were told we would never go to a decent college. No one would accept us to a reputable school, having graduated from a Malcolm X high school. I attended Princeton University
Right.
and later Columbia University of Journalism, Graduate School of Journalism. So I guess they were wrong and we were correct in our vision. Adhimu, you want to take it from there?
Well, wait a minute. Let me ask you, because I got to ask you, because you included some
Sure.
of the opposition. You legend has it that you also faced some very personal opposition that confronted you personally. I don't know if you want to talk about.
Well, you know, there are a number of brothers from the nation who were very upset about the name change because, of course, they thought that Malcolm was a traitor to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And, you know, I faced physical threats from some of those brothers. I was not attacked, but it was an uncomfortable situation for a period of time, you know. And that's sometimes internecine struggles occur. And that was my first experience with that.
And we need to learn from those lessons of those mistakes that create those kind of conflicts. I should say two things very quickly, then we'll come to you, Adhimu, right? One of the first things that Elijah Muhammad's son, Wallace D. Muhammad, Imam Muhammad, did when he came in was recognize Malcolm's sincerity and impact, and had Mosque number 7 renamed Masjid Malcolm Shabazz, right? Minister Farrakhan, who admitted that the line that ministers were given during that time to call Malcolm a traitor, that he participated in that, right? And when an effort was made to frame Kabila Shabazz, and then Adhimu, you knew Kabila personally, right? Kabila is Malcolm's second daughter, who was framed for conspiring to kill Minister Farrakhan. Minister Farrakhan decided to respond in another way, in a way that would reflect the spirit of what would become later the Million Man March, and said, we need to help the Shabazz family. We know that this is not our daughter doing this, and we know how the FBI gets down, and we need to have some healing. And there was a major gathering at Madison Square Garden that featured Minister Farrakhan and Dr. Betty Shabazz together and united in their opposition to FBI instigation and its repressive character in our community, and the support for mutual support of each other for what later become the Million Man March. And of course, Betty even spoke at the Million Man March, right? So those things need to be said also, right? Those were two gestures of rapprochement that did have some impact. And of course, we should say that there was a big struggle within the Nation of Islam over Malcolm. A lot of folks in the nation felt that the nation's leadership was wrong to mistreat him that way. Adhimu, one of your favorite longtime elder members, the late Amanifu Williams, left the nation because of what happened in Malcolm, because before the assassination took place, right? But saw it coming, and it would later leave Maulana Karinga's organization to come to Newark, because similar contradictions would brew in that space, right? So we need these conversations, and these critical moments in our history need to be appreciated, because we need to learn from those mistakes when we make them. And as all of us now are elders, right? Young folks are coming to us for some real direction on how to do this thing, right? And they need to be able to hear us honestly talking about not just the good things, the great things, the big moments, the highlights, right? But also the mistakes that we made, so they don't make the same mistakes. And hopefully they go a little further than we did, as each generation has its own unique responsibility using Fanon's language. And this is also Fanon's centennial, right? Adhimu. In fact, it was 9 is the 20th of July. Akili, did you realize that? Fanon is the 20th
What's
of
that?
July, his birthday. Fanon's,
Oh,
that's right. And this is also his
oh,
centennial. Right?
no.
Yeah, you can't make this stuff up.
Oh, wow.
That's the ancestral math that the great Alombe Brad taught a lot of us over the years. Then we come on in and place yourself in those times.
Well, let me say thank you for having me on, Zaid. And you mentioned our decades-long friendship of 30 years. Akili and I, our friendship is 55 years.
And ours
55
is
years.
But we met in 79, so ours is 40-something.
Yeah, so we met in I believe we met in the fall of 1970, which would have been the beginning of my senior year. But in 1967, it's amazing, how parallel Akili's life and my life are in terms of how we've moved. Not exactly the same, but it's almost like we were running on the same obstacle course, so to speak. And he mentioned his mother went to Southside. My mother went to Southside too. She graduated from Southside also. And that's something we never shared. Like I never, until tonight, Zaid, you did something valuable. Until tonight, I never knew that his mother went to Southside, and he probably didn't know my mother went to Southside too. But anyway, in the summer of 1967, I was 13 years old. July 12th was the first day of the Newark Rebellion. We don't call it a riot, we call it a rebellion. And it was the first night of my life, of those 13 years, because we were sitting on the porch and we were literally watching the rebellion unfold in our neighborhood. The rebellion mainly happened in the Central Ward, but down on Springfield Avenue, closer. It began down by Hayes Homes. They beat John Smith. The police beat John Smith, the cab driver, and that was really the incident that triggered the rebellion. Ultimately, triggered the rebellion. I lived about maybe a mile from there on South 12th Street. So when the rebellion broke out, it started down there in the projects, but it worked its way up through the black parts of Newark, New Jersey. So we were sitting on the porch, and I was asking my grandfather, why was everybody so upset? Why were they doing these things? And then my grandfather started talking to me about, he didn't start with Newark. He started with his experience in the Army, the racism that he experienced in the Army, the racism that he experienced when he went to Europe, because my grandfather was a World War I veteran. My father was a World War II veteran. So that was the first serious discussion I can remember in my family that they had with me. Now, they discussed things among themselves, but a discussion that I was a part of. That fall, I didn't think school was going to start on time. There was so much upheaval and tumult during the rebellion. I didn't think we were going to have school, but school started on time. It started in September, started the second week of September, and I went to Arts High School. Akili went to Southside High School. To fast forward, ultimately, I was the what you would call the vice president at Arts High. They would call deputy mayor of the student government in 1970. Newark had 2 teachers' strikes. They had a short teacher strike in 1970 and a long teacher strike in 1971. It was during the teacher strike of 1970 that I actually met Amiri Baraka for the first time. I was a junior at Arts High School, and to my surprise, he was invited to speak. Now, they didn't let him speak to the whole student body, which could all fit in the auditorium because there weren't more than 700 students at Arts High School. They let him address the members of the student government. And so I went down to room B13. And I know that room because that was where I took Latin. That's where my Latin class was. And the student reps were in there. And the way the adults in the school were acting, you would have thought Goliath was coming to the school. You know, everybody's running around whispering about Leroy Jones. Leroy Jones, that was his name before he became Amir and then Amiri Baraka. And so I'm looking for this huge giant, you know, and this somewhat short, not shortest, but somewhat short. Let's just say the way they had built him up in through word did not match his physical stature, but he had two men with him that were giants, you know. So he spoke to us, and I never heard anybody speak like he did. I've been to church, I'd heard preachers, but I never heard anyone speak with the force and the clarity about race and power in America that he did at that time. And he spoke to us primarily about the need for community control of schools in the Black community. And we met, it was just a brief meeting, you know, there was no real involvement. So the next year we had the longest teacher strike in the history of the United States. It was 11 weeks. And they said if we missed 35 consecutive days of school, we weren't going to graduate. And so at that time, we had a citywide student organization called the Newark Federation of High School Student Councils. And that's how I met Akili and his sister, right? Your sister too was a representative, I believe, at that time. And it was funny because the board actually initiated the federation to meet because I guess they wanted us to discuss the strike, or I'm not really clear what they want us to do, but they told us to go downtown or to go wherever we went. I can't exactly remember, to the student federation meeting and to find out what was going on. So that meeting ultimately led to walkouts in schools around the city, including my school, Arts High School, because they told us if we missed 35 days of school, we weren't going to graduate. And many of us had already applied to college and like, we got to graduate. So in March of 1971, by then I was the mayor, not the deputy mayor, what you would call the president of the student council. And we organized that walkout. My principal at that time, her name was Teresa Davis. She said, if you take, she ran into me the day before the walkout. So apparently, no, there are no secrets. You think something's secret. The minute you say, keep this a secret, you know it's going to get out. She told me, if you take these students out of school, you're not going to graduate. You're not going to go to college. But it was too late to call it back. So that year, 1970, the year before, Ken Gibson was elected first Black mayor of Newark. So we marched downtown. We marched to the Gateway Hotel. About 400 of us went down. About 200 of us got into the hotel and we sat in. And at that time, Mayor Gibson came to us to appeal to us to end our sit-in. And he said he would deal with our demands, because we had demands too. The teachers had demands, we had demands. And he said he would deal with our demands. And as a result of that meeting, to fast forward, he asked me if I would be willing to be a member of the Newark Board of Education. He asked me in June, before I graduated. It was like a week or 2 weeks before graduation, if I would be a member of the school board. I wasn't even old enough to vote. I was 17 and you had to be 18 to vote. But I eventually accepted, and on July 1st, 1971, I became the youngest school board member in the history of the country. And I think I still hold that record, because other young school board members who've been elected and appointed, they were 18 years old. I think I was the only 17-year-old. So I was appointed in July. In August of 1971, that's when I meet Amiri Baraka. I was asked to come and meet with him in the Hikalu Umoja. He had two headquarters. One was Hikalu Umoja, which the masses call 502 High Street. and the other one was Hikalu. Like you can surmise that Hikalu Umoja means House of Unity. He had another headquarters, Hikalu Imwalimu, House of the Teacher, that was on at that time Belmont Avenue. And I met him in August of 1971. There are two men that had a profound effect on my political development. It almost goes without saying that one of those was Ken Gibson. Ken Gibson, by appointing me to the board, put me in the political sphere of Newark, New Jersey. Like he literally with his hand placed me there. And then Amiri Baraka, who awoke Black political consciousness in me. I didn't get to meet Malcolm X personally, but I met Amiri Baraka, and it was through Amiri Baraka that I became acquainted with the ideas of Malcolm X. Right next to Hikalu Umoja was the Nyumba ya Ujamaa, which was a bookstore, Nyumba ya Ujamaa's House of Cooperative Economics, I believe, something like that. And they sold books and African clothes and records. And I have right here, this is the first book I ever bought by Malcolm X.
I still have mine.
And I purchased it at, trying to get it on screen, at Nyumba ya Ujamaa. And if you can see up into the corner, you know I'm not lying, because the cost of this book was $1.65. So you know I'm telling the truth, because it had to be 50 years ago when a book cost $1.65. And you can see it's almost ready to turn to dust. The pages are already yellow. But this was the first book I read. I read the autobiography of Malcolm X after I read Malcolm X Speaks. And I think that had an impact on how I relate to Malcolm's ideas today. But to try to bring my stream and Akili's stream together, I was appointed to the board, and the political movement in Newark was also a cultural movement, a Black cultural movement. So as Akili mentioned, when I was on the board, we changed the name of a number of schools before we changed the name of Southside High School. We changed, and this happened when I was on the school board. Sometimes I put forward the resolution, sometimes other board members put forward, sometimes I would move it, sometimes they would move it and I would second it. But we changed the names of South 10th Street to Harriet Tubman. We changed the name South 8th Street to Martin Luther King. We changed the name of Robert Treat to Marcus Garvey. We changed the names of a number of schools. We changed after I met Rosa Parks as a school board member. I was invited to the SCLC conference in New Orleans in 1971. Same month that I met Amiri Baraka, I went to the SCLC conference to receive a youth award, and I met Rosa Parks there. And when I returned, I put forward the motion to change the name of Waverly Avenue School to Rosa Parks School. So Akili Buchanan, who is sitting here today, let me state for the record, if I don't say it nowhere else, he was far more politically advanced than I was. He really was. I mean, when I was in high school, I was very unpolitical, non-political, I don't know how you say it, apolitical, you know. Akili was in the Committee for a Unified North. He was in Baraka's organization. He was wearing the uniform, the green dashiki and the talasimu. And, you know, I was struggling to keep up with that brother, you know, and I learned about the committee, and I learned about African culture and Black consciousness, in part also through Akili, because I was interacting with him more than I was interacting with Baraka. So as he stated, he put forward the petition drive. He pushed that forward in the school. They came to the school board meeting and said they got 1,000 students to sign it. And they did. They had the petitions with the signatures. So I moved it. You know, we changed the name of Southside High School to Malcolm X Shabazz High School. Jesse Jacob, who was the president of the board, I believe he was the one that seconded the motion, and the board passed it. They passed the resolution. Man, all hell broke out after that. And I think what happened was, Akili, he was a bright young man. I believe he was in the advanced program school within a school, SWAS, that was at Malcolm. He was always brilliant. And I think they saw him as kind of like model student, and this is going to be like an exercise in civics. They're going to get these signatures, but we know the board is not going to pass no resolution to change the name of Southside to Malcolm X. And then it really happened. And then they literally lost their minds behind that. And the teachers,
the first institution in the country to be renamed after Malcolm X.
Yes. First. And the teachers were telling the students, this just wasn't somebody walking around saying, you're not going to get in the college. The teachers, the administrators, not all of them, but certainly many of them were telling the students they weren't going to be able to get into college. And I had to come up there. I had to come up to Malcolm X to talk to by myself. The whole board passed a resolution, but the majority of the board didn't come to talk at the school. And I had to talk to the whole student body to try to help them to understand how important it was how important the renaming of the school was, and how they were going to be able to get into college, and so on and so forth. It was very tense. And to this day, I'm telling you, to this day, there are people who are trying to get the school's name changed back. Alumni, to this day. Now, you have to bring them in to explain their reasons why they want to do that. But it's like, even though this wasn't a full-scale revolution, so to speak, you can see just from this simple reform, the cycle of revolution, how people push for a change, they accomplish that change, and then there's always a counter reaction. Like if you learned about the French Revolution, after the revolution, there was what they call the Thermidor, which was the counter revolution to overturn the revolution, which eventually resulted in the execution of Robespierre, who was one of the leaders of the French Revolution. But Akili, he's very modest brother. Let me tell you, they was on him. They were on Akili. And we were getting reports at the board that people wanted to do physical harm to him, and he's very modest, and he's a humble brother and a good brother. But what he did was a revolutionary thing that has come down through the decades.
That's right.
And it will outlive all of us on this program right now. And that's why, I think he gets tired of me doing it. But every time, he's somewhere and I'm there, I point out to people, that's the man that changed the name of Southside to Malcolm X High School. Let me just say one other thing real quick. After the name change at Southside High School to Malcolm X there was a move to change the name of Belmont Avenue to Malcolm X Boulevard. Now I say there was a move. Who was making that move? It was Amiri Baraka, Committee for a Unified Newark Congress of African People. They wanted to change the name of Belmont Avenue to Malcolm X Boulevard. And it was put through the city council. Now, what happened in 1970 in this apartheid city, Newark was an apartheid city. It was a predominantly Black city that was ruled by a white minority. And then finally in 1970, the first Black mayor was elected and members were elected to the city council. As Akili pointed out, he was at the Black and Puerto Rican Convention. This was the community choice ticket, political electoral ticket that came out of the Black and Puerto Rican Convention with Ken Gibson as a mayoral candidate, Sharp James, South Ward, Dennis Westbrook, Central, et cetera, et cetera. So we got members on the city council in 1970, but we didn't get the majority. So the predominantly white city council, and I think if we go back, they might have even had some support from one of the black ones, said no, they wasn't going to change the name. The people wanted it, but they weren't going to change the name of Belmont Avenue to Malcolm X Boulevard. The compromise was Irvin Turner, and that's what it is today, Irvin Turner Boulevard, because Irvin Turner was the first black elected official in the history of the city of Newark. He was elected out of the Central Ward to the city council in 1960, and that's the story behind Irvin Turner Boulevard. The people's choice was Malcolm X. Irvin Turner was a compromise.
Mm-hmm. Now, both of you, I want both of you to take a beat, take a minute, catch your breath. You let out a lot of Adhimu, right? Akili, he loved on you pretty good, right? And you deserve all of that, right? I want you to, in this next phase, and we're going into the home stretch, is that each of you take a step back and talk about the organizations you just spotlighted. Committee for Unified Newark, United Brothers, Congress of African People, and what that means in terms of Amiri Baraka's legacy as an organizer. And Kelly, you go first, because Damon went on a little bit. Let him catch his breath.
Well, you have to also, again, I'm going to talk about context, because Amiri grew, Amiri developed. You have to understand, during the early 70s to the late 70s, the African liberation struggle was taking place. Okay, and we were being influenced by a lot of leaders from Africa: Amilcar Cabral, Sekou Touré, Julius Nyerere, Kwame Nkrumah, Samora Machel. I mean, and many of these brothers were Marxist-Leninists, and so that rattled our narrow nationalist perspective, and it impacted Amiri. And there was an organization called African Liberation Support Committee, which put on African Liberation Days in Washington, D.C. And the influence of Marxism on the Black liberation movement was indelible. I mean, during this period of time, there was a major struggle between, ideologically speaking, where do we go from here? And I don't mean Dr. King, with no disrespect, but I mean, do we take the race line, all white people are the devils, or the class line, that it's a struggle against the bourgeoisie, the ruling class, and the proletariat, working class, and peasants. And so many of us started studying Marx, Lenin, Mao, even Stalin. And that had an impact on the major leaders of the Black liberation movement here in the United States. And Amiri, I was not a part of the organization by then. I was at Princeton, but Amiri and members of CFUN, Congress of African People, were struggling out these ideas, and a major touchstone or cornerstone or turning point in the Black liberation movement, particularly with Amiri, because Amiri was not just a political figure, it was a cultural, artistic figure. He was co-founder of the Black Arts Movement, created indelible works, a Dutchman, what have you. Anyway, when the Black nationalists, came to Washington, D.C. It was at Howard University, and came out with embracing a class analysis of our struggle. That was a major turning point in the Black liberation movement. We had others who were Marxist-Leninists, took a class line, Abdul Akali and others. Stokely, at the time, Stokely was there as well. He was at in Washington at Howard University during this particular event. Stokely had come to the United States from, I think he was in Guinea at the time, came back, and he kind of straddled the fence. I mean, he did not come out, although eventually, I mean, it was clear that Kwame Ture took a class analysis, but he did not want it. It seemed, and this is my opinion, he did not want to isolate brothers and sisters who took the nationalist line.
He didn't want the rupture.
He didn't. Yes, he didn't want the rupture. You had Max Sanford who was there. I mean, a lot of folks struggled with that because of the nature of racism, white supremacy in America. It was hard for many of us to now study Marx and Lenin and think that would be a major arrow for shooting at our oppression. I studied, I mean, you go to the library, I got the complete works of Lenin, I got the complete works of Mao, I got the complete works of Stalin, but I also had the complete works of Abraham Lincoln. So, I mean, my library is filled with works, intellectual works. And I have to say I credit that to the need for intellectual study. I got that from Amiri. I got that from Kwame Ture. I mean, I'll never forget him saying the guerrilla studies, and he studies to analyze what is happening. I'm trying to create his voice in order to understand the struggles of the world. I mean, so our intellectual development was I have to attribute it to the bravery, the strength of Amiri making that move, understanding class analysis as absolutely necessary for defeating capitalism and imperialism and racial capitalism, right? And so I still hold those ideas. I don't think all white people are devils, although white supremacy is truly evil and satanic and has to be defeated by any means necessary. So that's where I'm, my art today is a reflection of all of my political and artistic development. Again, I wish Amiri was still alive to see my artwork and critique it and tell me, well, I don't know this, or dead on, you hit the nail on the head. I wish he was here. Yeah.
Totally. Then we'll take a step back. Right? Akili leap forward and went past C-Fund in Congress of African people and that nationalist phase. But it's important also to appreciate what got done through Committee for Unified North, what got done through Congress of African people, and how those spaces will be natural places for that argument ultimately to develop, because that's how our struggle was developing globally, right? But folks need to appreciate, again, coming back to Amiri, the organizer, right? How do we appreciate those spaces that he organized and their impact on Newark, and how many came to Newark looking to get involved, looking for direction, appreciating what was happening in this town, right? And to place themselves in struggle. We've got stories like that too, in terms of folks. Some folks came from other places to come into the organization. As a poet, I've got a long-standing relationship with Ngoma the poet, right? Ngoma came from Virginia, straight out of the military, but had to come to Newark.
A whole lot of brothers and sisters from around
like
the country, from different colleges,
came
to Newark.
Everybody loved Farah,
That's
absolutely, true. Right? So I want that folks to get that. So give us some of that flavor if you can, and we'll wind down.
Right. Well, but before I go to that, let me just say, because I'm scared I won't get to say it before the program be over, how important it is for people to read and study the thinking, the ideas of Malcolm X. Now, I don't have anything, I would never tell people not to read the autobiography. I think reading the autobiography has value, and we don't have time now to get into a discussion critiquing the autobiography. Suffice it to say, with whatever shortcomings the autobiography have, it's worthwhile reading, because it does give you some context and some insight into the development of Malcolm X. But we remember Malcolm X because of his political analysis, his political thought. And I don't think enough people have really dug deep in that regard. A lot of us will listen to one Malcolm X speech, Message to the Grassroots, or By Any Means Necessary. We see one movie, and we think we're experts on Malcolm. And I use that as a metaphor, as a cliche, but it's really true. There's some truth to this. People see Spike Lee movie and they think they know all they need to know about Malcolm. People got to read Malcolm's speeches. They got to read Malcolm X Speaks cover to cover. They got to read final speeches cover to cover. They got to read By Any Means Necessary cover to cover. I'm not talking about that's the name of a volume of his speeches. They got to read Malcolm X on Afro-American history. They got to read Malcolm X Speaks to Young People, and on and on to on. I would tell everybody to read as much as you can, the speeches, the interviews, the articles, etc. on Malcolm, and pay particular attention to what he was saying in 1964 and in 1965. Because at that point, he is outside of the Nation of Islam, and he's beginning to develop a more independent view and analysis of the world. When I say independent, I don't mean in the strictest sense, I mean independent of the Nation of Islam, because he was at one time the chief spokesman of the nation. So his ideas were fundamentally the teachings of Elijah Muhammad. And we have to give examination. There must be examination of the impact of the Nation of Islam on Malcolm. It did give Malcolm a national stage. I mean, to this day, the man been dead for 60 years, and we're talking about him like he's still alive. His impact is profound on the Black freedom struggle, Black liberation struggle, et cetera, et cetera. So please, brothers and sisters, and take time to read. I know you can go on YouTube, you can watch the speech, and you should. You should see Malcolm speaking, because the messenger is almost as important as the message. Malcolm was a powerful speaker. He could convey certain ideas in a way. I know he fired me up. Now, I was somewhat familiar with King even before, and it's natural, right? Because the system leaned, was a little, the system killed Dr. King, but, in some places, people, were talking about King and the civil rights movement, et cetera, et cetera. Eventually King got a holiday and so on and so forth. But I was somewhat familiar with King prior to 1967. I came to Malcolm through Amiri Baraka. Amiri Baraka was the transmission belt for me to bring Malcolm's ideas to myself and to hundreds of thousands of other young people like Akili, who became a leader, not just of students, but a leader in his own right. Because I'm telling you, a lot of I've seen a lot of documentaries. I've seen movies about Malcolm. I've read books, and a lot of what has been produced about Malcolm X does not truly capture his revolutionary essence. Yes, Malcolm was a revolutionary Black nationalist. Malcolm was a Pan-Africanist. Malcolm was an internationalist. But Malcolm was also anti-imperialist and anti-capitalist. And that's the part that's always left out. Almost all the time. People will talk about, the things that Malcolm, we got to control. Yes, we do. Black people should control the institutions in our community. But one of the things that spurred many of us on to Marxism was the fact that once we got control of these cities, the condition of Black people was not changing. And by the time 1974, by the time my school board term was over, and it was time for me to make some decisions about the next step I was going to make in life, I was trying to figure out what the hell happened. Because we had, in the election of 1974, we had elected and got a majority of Black people on the city council in Newark. And many of these Black people were the adversaries of Amiri Baraka. People, you listen to some people tell this history now. It's like with Malcolm. Everybody loved Malcolm now. But I remember when Gil Noble told me himself, he said when he used to see Malcolm, this was before he became the Gil Noble of Like It Is, right? He said he would see Malcolm come down the street, he'd run to the other side. And that's the way everybody loved Malcolm now, but they did not love Malcolm when Malcolm was alive. That's really what happens to a lot of revolutionaries. Their revolutionary essence is exerted, so to speak, taken out, and then they become, as they said about Karl Marx, they become a harmless icon. Malcolm X was a revolutionary.
Absolutely. So come back now. We'll bring you back.
All right, let me come back to the Black nationalist period. That period was very important. It was very important. Look, the civil rights movement got the Voting Rights Act passed in 1965. And after that, millions of Black people registered to vote. First of all, most of the Black people in the South wasn't voting. And a lot of Black people in the North that could vote didn't think they had much to vote for. So the Black nationalist period pushed Black electoral politics, pushed us to get representation. July 1967, Amiri Baraka was among those who organized the first Black Power Conference that was held in Newark, July 20th, 1967. The following year, Black Power Convention held at West Kenny Junior High School in 1968. The following year, 1969, the Black and Puerto Rican Convention is held at Clinton Place Junior High School. Out of that comes a community choice ticket, and Gibson is elected in 1970 with Sharp James and Dennis Westbrooks on the city council. It's very interesting. In the beginning, Akili talked about how he had helped Westbrooks I ended up working for Westbrooks after I was appointed to the school board. After I left Princeton and came home to finish my school board term, my mother said, "You're not going to sit in here. You're not in school. You better go get a job." So I ended up working. I got a job. In fact, Amiri Baraka got me that job, got Westbrooks to hire me as his aide so I could be working, you know, have a 40-hour week paycheck so I could help my mother, you know, and not just be sitting in the house. So all of that happened. So you had, I mentioned those conventions. We must not leave out the Pan-African Congress that was held in 1971, and then the National Black Political Convention in 1972. So during this Black nationalist period and civil rights period, you had an increase in Black elected officials from about 466, about 400 Black elected officials in 1966 to over 10,000 in 1972. Now, did that fundamentally change the condition of Black people? No, but it got us through that phase. We had to go through that phase because there was this common belief that if we control the politics of our community, somehow we would improve the condition. And to some degree, there were reforms that were made that did help people, but it didn't change the fundamental position of Black people. And that's what was pushing the development, our political development, because the Black nationalist framework by itself was not sufficient to help us to understand. Now, one of the things that pushed us, one part of it was the material condition, what we were experiencing and the way our people were living. But the other thing was Pan-Africanism. Amiri Baraka and many Black nationalists were also Pan-Africanists. And that caused us to look at Africa, to look at the anti-colonial struggles in Africa, to look at who was leading those struggles, and also what their ideological position was. And in almost all of the revolutionary struggles that we were supporting in Africa as Pan-Africanists, those African leaders were talking about socialism. Amiri Baraka just didn't wake up one morning and say, "I'm not going to be a Black nationalist, I'm going to be a slave." It didn't happen like that. Look, if I tell you to look to Africa, and I tell you about how progressive Kwame Nkrumah is, you're going to look at what Kwame Nkrumah wrote. You're going to look at Africa Must Unite. You're going to look at neo-colonialism, the last stage of imperialism. You're going to look at the handbook of revolutionary warfare. In neo-colonialism, the last stage of imperialism, and in the handbook of guerrilla warfare, Kwame Nkrumah says he's a Marxist-Leninist. It's no ambivalent. It was no guessing. It wasn't a guessing game. He says it right there. We reading Amilcar Cabral. All the Pan-Africanists cite Amilcar Cabral. Amilcar Cabral said he was a Marxist-Leninist, and that was the theory that was guiding their revolution. So did Samora Machel in Mozambique. You know, so did Dr. Agostinho Neto in Angola, and on and on and on. So by looking to Africa and looking to the ideology, the revolutionary ideology that was guiding the African revolution, the African anti-colonial struggle, that also was causing us to change our ideas. Like right now, to this day, we still read Cabral. We read Return to the Source. We read Tell No Lies, Claim No Easy Victories, and on and on and on. So that was the value of the revolutionary Black nationalist period. And then as Akili outlined, these conditions, the material conditions of our people, the actual practical experience we were having in the struggle for social change, the ideology that we were examining of the revolutionaries in Africa. And then if you look to Africa, you're going to look to the rest of the world, because Africa was doing what? The African revolutionaries, they were looking at the Vietnamese revolutionaries. They were looking at the Chinese revolutionaries. They were looking at the Russian Revolution. They were looking at other revolutions. So there was a kind of logical, ideological progression that would take you. And what the sisters say, I'll take you there, and then the Staple Singers.
That's right.
Would say, I'll take you there, So all of this didn't happen like we woke up, and all of a sudden we this and now we that. It didn't happen like that. There was an evolution. There was a lot of struggle. A lot of people had a hard time keeping up with Baraka. When Baraka moved, to more, like he said, Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong thought, because he was down with the Chinese Revolution, and a lot of people had a hard time. A lot of people was like, well, we were anti-white racist oppression, and now we looking at all these European thinkers. We looking at Karl Marx, we looking at Lenin, and on. A lot of people had a hard time. You wouldn't know that today, because a lot of people, and then even like Karenga, who was like one of the main, as they said, the cultural nationalists, right? Akili knows this because we were in study group together. Karenga made the transition. He didn't make it when Baraka made it, but he made it kind of shortly thereafter. He wrote a series of articles in the Black Scholar where he was trying to grapple.
Right.
He was trying to grapple. He was trying to merge his nationalist Qaeda ideology, which was his black nationalist ideology, with Marxism. He wrote a very well-known essay. What was the name of that essay? Overturning Ourselves. The struggle to overturning ourselves, where you could see him begin to grapple and try and incorporate some of these Marxist ideas, Marxist revolutionary idea. And then Cuba. I mean, Malcolm met with when Fidel and Che came to Harlem. Malcolm X met with them. They were not Africans, they were Cubans. Now, Cubans got a lot of African blood, but Malcolm drew very close to the Cuban Revolution, and we know that the Cuban Revolution,
while he was still in the Nation of Islam, by the way.
That's right, played a very important role in the African Revolution.
Keep up with his evolution.
Right.
So let's find out. And y'all got it in. I appreciate it, right? And we went over time, but this is our microphone, so it's all right, right? But let's wind down for sake of everybody. I
can't wind down.
I got you fired up now, right? I know
I'm on fire. I got Akili here. I got you here. I'm gonna have to go run around the block 10 times after this.
We can't have people on
this is a rare conversation, brother. This is a rare conversation for us in Jersey. Now, y'all in New York City, y'all have had these conversations, but
story though, right?
Yes.
Detroit has got a story. Chicago's got a story. Harlem and Brooklyn got two separate stories in the same damn city. Atlanta, we can go down the line, right?
That's right.
Those stories of how struggle evolved and progressed, and all of that's how we grow. That's how we grow. And bringing it back to Malcolm, Malcolm showed us how to be unafraid to grow.
Right. Let's not forget, Malcolm X said what? Malcolm X said, find me a capitalist and I'll find you a bloodsucker. See, that's one of the quotes you never hear. You hear the other quotes about education and the importance of history, but you never hear that quote.
He was also,
find me a capitalist and I'll find you a bloodsucker. Or the other one, you can't have capitalism without racism. That's right out of Malcolm X speeches.
And
he was also very, very clear on the Palestinian question years ago.
You set us off.
Say that. Say it again.
I said he was very clear about the Palestinian question years ago. I mean, he was very clear. It was a colonial settlement. That the Palestinians were being oppressed by Zionism and imperialism. He was very clear. I mean, go on YouTube and you'll see him talking about it.
Right.
But to that point, he goes to East Jerusalem in 1959. right?
1959.
That's right. He went on a mission abroad to pave the way for Elijah Muhammad to make his Hajj in 1959. And guess where he comes back to share that story on his camera and his film? Newark, New Jersey.
Isn't that something?
At the beginning of what was become Temple number 25. Right here. Can't make this stuff up. And of course, in 64, he actually goes to Gaza and comes straight out hardcore on the matter of principle for Palestinian solidarity, and will be our first revolutionary figure to really take us that way. Snick will come behind that with Kwame and them, following behind them. But, yeah, that's important to lift up. That is important to lift up. Now,
we can't sleep on the fact that Newark itself as a city,
that's why we're here, baby.
Was a major center of culture. I mean, all the way back, even before bebop era and jazz. I mean, so much cultural aquifer. It was a major cultural and political aquifer. Daddy Grace, Father Divine, Drew Ali, so many black thoughts coming out of Newark, New Jersey. Important. We can't forget that.
That's right. And that's what drove this conversation. I want each of you to give
there are two books I want to mention before we jump off that I want to urge people to read. And one is From Civil Rights to Black Liberation, Malcolm X and the Organization of Afro-American Unity by William Sales. If you can find that book, find it. Zaid says it's out of print, but maybe if you go on Amazon.
Us who know Bill Sales, we need to talk to our elder comrade to work with whoever we need to work with to get it back in print, because that was one of the most important political studies of Malcolm that we all should be studying if we're going to study Malcolm the Revolutionary and his impact on revolutionary thought.
And the other book is A Lie of Reinvention, Correcting Manning Marable's Malcolm X, edited by Jared A. Ball and Todd Stephen Burroughs.
That's right. That was one of 2 volumes. Manning Marable was so bad, and we're very public about our condemnation of what that guy did, right? And for all we could have done, right? That didn't generate one; it generated 2 volumes of angry radical scholars taking on what could have been and what he did that was just right. And Jared and Todd did one, and Herb Boyd and Maulana did another. Right, both of them. And we had Herb here in our last spotlight because Herb also has a new book out with Don Rojas, Malcolm X and the CIA. And it's a very important read. Some access that Herb got to some CIA documents that needs to be looked at. Final thoughts, y'all, and let us wind it down. Great conversation. Love the animation and the insight. That's why we brought you here, right? Leads. Because we're going to be pushing this out. I just want everybody to subscribe to the page and push it out. The young folks they're trying to figure out this period, right? This conversation itself is a tool for political education. Go ahead, Akili.
We are in very, very, very serious revolutionary times. If we want it to be revolutionary. That means we have to make a choice. We got a choice. We have, either we get to take the road for fascism and silence, or we speak up, act, and do. Okay? We have to study our history, study the history of imperialism and capitalism, and how fascism is a part capitalism, when the government and corporate interests merge, and particularly the context of this country where racial capitalism is at the forefront all right? Because we are their scapegoats. You know, it's going to hit white folk too, but we're their scapegoats for now. We are, you know, and that's why you see half of this country just going about their business as if nothing is happening, because they believe that nothing will happen to them. But we understand that fascism will impact all of us unless we act and do. And that requires us to study, to organize, to engage, to build a united front. And we need young people to give us that spirit and their activity and their, because the world will be left to them. And so what kind of world do we want for them?
That's right.
We know that this economy doesn't give a damn about them. We see it. Okay? So
yeah. Yeah. We got most of what you said. You went in and out a little bit. And then with your last thoughts, and we'll wrap up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
It's all right.
Well, I just reiterate what I said before. One, I'm really concerned about the revolutionary legacy of Malcolm X. I mean, time is passing, and I feel that if we don't struggle to keep alive the revolutionary legacy of Malcolm, that many of the generations that follow us, they're not even going to know who Malcolm was, much less what his ideology was. So on two levels, we got to struggle. We got to struggle to pass down the memory and the legacy of Malcolm X to generations behind us. And then we got to struggle to maintain the revolutionary essence of Malcolm X. Malcolm X wanted the revolutionary transformation of this society. You know, if we had more time, I mean, I got the page right here, you know, I would read the whole thing, but we don't have time right now. People should read Malcolm, read what Malcolm said, pay particular attention to what he said, the speeches he gave in 1964 and 1965. Remember that he was trying to build the Organization of Afro-American Unity. In the book that I have here, Final Speeches of Malcolm X, and also in another book titled By Any Means Necessary, which is also the title of one of the speeches Malcolm gave, the charter of the OAAU is actually in the book. Read the charter of the OAAU. It will help you to understand, won't give you a complete understanding, but it will help you to understand what Malcolm was trying to do politically at the time of his assassination. And then when we read Malcolm, don't read Malcolm like you read in the Bible. In fact, I would say don't read any person's political thought like you're reading the Bible, especially if that thought is 25, 30, 45, 50 years old, 60 years old. You have to read with a critical eye. You have to read with a critical mind. You have to try to apply what you're reading to the conditions that exist in our country today. You know, when we were reading a lot of the third world revolutionaries, when we were reading Cabral and Nkrumah, when we were reading Mao Zedong, they made revolution in countries that were not the same as this country. We're in the belly of the beast. We're in the epicenter of worldwide capitalism and imperialism. So our revolution may look somewhat different than a revolution made in an impoverished third world country. Mm-hmm. So all I'm saying is you have to, you know, you have to apply concrete ideas, as one person said, to concrete conditions. You have to apply the ideas to the world, to the country that we're dealing with today. So that's my that's my closing remarks. There's a lot more to say, but maybe we'll have a part 2.
Yeah,
And we can say the part
I actually
2.
want to develop something around these local struggles. Newark today, Detroit, actually really something I really want to look at. And if I ever had the time to actually write again, I would really like to develop that as a book, as a written conversation to support what we're doing as well. I want to thank each of you for what you said, shared today, and what you have been for us down through the years, right? Between, let's see, it's how many years? 55 between y'all, right? Between me
Yep.
and the West, that's let's see, 79. That's 47 years. That's over 100 years just between. Right? It's over 100 years, right? And I ain't mentioned how long I know Akili, right? That's we don't put in some work,
I'm
right?
I'm just glad we're still here to keep the struggle
Indeed,
going.
indeed.
That's right.
And both of you here,
Glad we're still
in good
here.
shape too, because a lot of us ain't here, and a lot of us who are, in this age threshold ain't here in good shape, right? So we also have to take care of ourselves. That's one of the things I love about young folks. They into this thing called wellness and self-care and whatnot. That wasn't even in our
That's
conversation.
real.
That wasn't in none of
It's
our
real.
conversations. So yeah, so a salute to our young. Right, this year, as we mentioned, as we started this conversation, it's Malcolm Centennial, Cabral Centennial, Lumumba Centennial, Robert Williams, Nick Rose with Guns, all that class of 1925, Medgar Evers, all of them represented a vortex of struggle that takes us around the world and takes us where the hell we need to be trying to go, right? And Malcolm
Yep.
was a light for us here in coming out of our struggle. So I want to thank you both. Malcolm, Amiri as organizers, right? Both of them, right? You trying to unite folk, Committee for a Unified North, right? Okay. Right. The National Black Political Gary was big. That's all Malcolm's line. The question of the United Front, right?
Right.
The question of the United Front. And of course, we are in the time of fascism, and we need to act like that. Not because we this is not the first time we've been going through this particular music and this particular dance, but it's a particularly dangerous one for this moment that folks need to be ready for. And I've said to young people, every chance I get, they come with the politics of reaction in Trump. We come with the politics of revolution and solidarity and unity with Malcolm.
And Baba Zaid, we want to thank you for all the years that you have been in the struggle, for all the contributions that you have made, brother. You have not gotten the accolades commensurate with the amount of work that you have put in. And I haven't had a chance to say it anywhere else, but I'm saying it here. And I'm saying it here for a reason, because we're making a record here, how much we appreciate all that you have done to try to keep alive that revolutionary spirit and pass it on to our community and especially to our generations. Yes, he's still full of fire.
We ain't through.
Still full of
Ain't nothing
fire.
else to do. That's right. We ain't through. We know what we got to do, right? And with love to our young, with love to everybody in the organization is younger than me, but I want to lift up again Rafisa Shahabuddin, our teacher of the year at Shabazz High School.
Isn't that something?
You can't make this up.
Congratulations.
Yes. Praise the teacher. Praise the teaching, and great organizers are great teachers, right? So our next Revolutionary Fourth Sunday will be August 24th, yes, right? It'll be in the thick of Black August. It's the day after Maroon Schultz's birthday, or when our great revolutionaries came out of the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army. We will probably do something around the question of our military or our self-defense traditions. I'm saying that probably. I want to pin down our guests first, right? But we will definitely be here and look forward to other things we're developing. We're going to reclaim our dinner, name it after our founding mother, Ialua Ferguson. We're going to develop this Malcolm X Human Rights Festival, a community-based targeted screenings of revolutionary films in context of revolutionary and community organizing, not the celebrity kind of stuff that you're used to with film festivals. All due respect to other film festivals and other book signings on both sides of the water. We want to lift up somebody special this year, the great Rosemary Mealy, who documented Malcolm's organizing and building that support for Fidel in Harlem with Malcolm and Fidel Memories of a Meeting. There's a lot to do. There's a lot here with Malcolm, and a lot here to a centennial. And we're just halfway through the centennial year of Malcolm X, and we ain't going nowhere, right? So X's and Malcolm is the answer. We'll see you in a few weeks. Thank you, everybody.